Okay, so let's get going here. Like I said, I'm Josephine Bush, and I have been working with SQL Server for nearly 20 years. I started in web development and moved to GIS, and then on to becoming a DBA. I worked in lots of different industries: government contracts, environmental, financial, alternative energy, and energy data analysis. I am the author of Learn SQL Database Programming. I have an MCSE in data management and analytics. I blog at SQLkitty.com, and you can reach me on Twitter at Hello SQL Kitty. Today, I'm going to talk about why and how you can use auditing and how auditing can benefit you. There are many problems you can solve with auditing. You can also make your life a lot easier by having a central location to query and report on auditing data you collect. I'll also touch a little bit on cloud auditing, just to give you a comparison to SQL Server auditing. A lot of people in America think of the Internal Revenue Service when they hear of auditing, and most people cringe when they think of being audited. It happened to me once. I got contacted by an IRS auditor, and she had to say to me, "Hold on a second, we think we owe you money," because people start getting really anxious about paying taxes and then also penalties. Plus, you have internal and external auditors. And I know that external auditors can be especially scary with interview processes and answering their questions. So it's no wonder auditing has a bad reputation, but I think auditing is a good thing. You want to make sure people are following proper procedure. If you don't have proper procedures, and the auditing can help you figure out what you might want a procedure to look like. Today's presentation is specifically about auditing SQL Server changes people make, like perms or schema changes. Maybe your company doesn't think it's important to audit. Maybe your company is required to audit, but you're not sure how to go about it. Even if you're not required, it shouldn't stop you from auditing. I set it up because I got tired of people blaming a database change on why something was broken. And after setting up auditing, I can see that no perms or schema change happened. And then they run off to look somewhere else to find the issue most times. I just did this setup on my own in between other projects. It wasn't important to my company at the time, but it was important to me. It was actually a good thing I prioritized the auditing setup, because we were acquired by a more heavily regulated company, and they need actual auditing reports that we review on a weekly basis. You're basically in the dark without auditing. Auditing can help you see who changed something, and maybe that change is what broke something. Maybe a user was set up for one purpose, and then it got shared around and everybody's using it now. We discovered one user was sharing out his domain credentials when he was out of the office so somebody could cover for him. We had an SA password that was handed out like candy years ago. So we audited SA, went to the users using it, said we need to give your user perms to do this work instead of them using SA. So we just had that conversation, because generally speaking, you can't go to people and say, "Hey, are you using SA?" People don't know, they don't have time to look, or they just don't answer you. Here's just a quick overview of what I just discussed about collecting, examining, knowing what's happening on your server, and helping you report on who made changes. There's just a brief pause here in case anybody has any questions so far.
I don't see any yet. I think you're good.
Okay, cool. Thank you. To audit SQL Server, you can use a built-in functionality called SQL Server Audit. It's good for capturing pretty much anything that happens on the database server. It's very flexible and pretty easy to set up. I primarily use this for seeing any permissions or schema changes. You can access it via SQL Server Management Studio, and you can script all that out for setup and querying as well. The first version of SQL Server that supported auditing was in 2008, and it was only Enterprise Edition. As of 2012, Microsoft expanded it to be available server level in all editions, and then database auditing was still only an enterprise. As of 2016 onwards, you can do server and database auditing with any edition, which is so much nicer since a lot of people don't only use standard. We have enterprise. We have a lot of standard servers, so it really helped open up the auditing options. To make SQL Server auditing work, you need 2 or 3 things depending on what you want to audit. You're required to create an audit specification, and this will determine where you store audit data. And you'll also need 1 server audit and or 1 database audit for audit data actually write to the audit specification. Each audit specification can have 1 server and 1 database audit inside it. And those server and database audits aren't dependent on each other. The server audit is generally good for auditing server level changes and or all the changes happening at a database level at the same time. So you can do that all at the server level. And the database audit is good for auditing 1 database or a subset of activities in 1 database, such as like inserts, updates, deletes. We'll go through some examples so you can see how each of these work. Don't audit the schema and perms changes at the database level if you're already doing that at the server level, though. This is just going to cause a lot of duplicate auditing to happen. To create a new audit specification, it's in the security section in SSMS. You can right-click it, and you get this dialog box. First, you're going to need to name your audit. I tend to name it something generic like audit specification, or sometimes underscore server name. You can create multiples of these audit specifications, and then you could name it something more descriptive. It's just kind of up to you how you want to name it. Queue delay, I just always leave it at 1,000. That's the default. It's just the wait time in milliseconds before it audits. I never really noticed any lag at 1,000. You could set it at 0 to have no lag. I just always left it at default. Have never seen any issues. Next option is the on audit log failure. And there's 3 options here. You can see I give you a screenshot of the drop down. I always just choose continue. This means that if the audit can't capture the statement, it just keeps going. You might miss a statement here and there, but I kind of doubt that happens very often, if at all. It's just the point is that it could theoretically miss something because if it can't capture it, it just keeps going. The next option, fail operation, means literally what it says. It's going to fail the operation it's trying to audit because it can't audit it. It's going to say, oh, nope, that statement fails. And the third option is shut down the server. That means it's going to literally do what it says. It's going to shut the server down and then it can't audit. I think fail operation and shut down the server are too drastic. And I'll just have a bunch of people screaming at me that there's something wrong with the server. So that's why I just choose continue. For the audit destination, you have a few options. And I apologize. Earlier, I said I provided this drop down for you. That's the file. These radio buttons are the on audit log failure choices. Now, this drop down is associated with the file, the destination option. So you have file, security log, or application log. I always write to the file choice because it's easiest for me. I don't have a lot of auditing restrictions. Yes, the auditors want to know what happened. They don't think that we're going in there secretly deleting audit files and not reporting what we said we would. I could see application log writing if you have a Splunk application that reads all the logs and gathers them in a central repository. Security log, I could see if you really just don't want anybody tinkering or tampering with anything that's being audited. And again, maybe you have a Splunk application that goes and reads all your logs and centralizes it for you too. We don't have that where I work either. So I just find file is easy. And so I just write it to a file on disk. Then you need to choose a path. So if you choose file, you need a path. Obviously with, well, maybe not obviously, but with security log and application log, you don't choose a path because that's going to go to the log on the Windows machine. So there's no choosing a path at that point. The number one thing with the file where you put it, don't put on the C drive. We're going to go over limiting the sizes of audit files, but you don't want it accidentally filling up the C drive. I don't usually put it on a SQL data drive or a log drive either, just because I don't want any other activity on those disks at the same time. We have an E drive for applications where I work, so that's just a great place for it to go. Then moving on to audit file maximum limits, size limits. I never let the audit just collect max files and max sizes. I personally found 4 files of 50 megabytes each is good for my needs. Its number and sizing is going to depend on what you need. If you have maximum files and they're gigantic, then they're going to be next to impossible to query. Since my files are quite small, I'd never say reserve disk space, but that is a checkbox option for you here. Once you created this audit, it is disabled by default. So you have to right click to enable it. No data will collect if you don't enable it. Once it's enabled, it'll place the file on disk. And this is where the file will live for your server and database audits that you will associate with this audit specification. As the data collects, this file is going to grow to 50 megabytes because that's what I specified. So it'll grow to whatever you specified in size. And then it'll create another file up to 4, which I specified 4. So it'll be however many files you specified. It'll create up to that many. Once the 4th file is full, it'll delete the oldest file and create another new file. And that's why it's really important for you to know how often you want to collect the data from the files so you don't miss any data. The first of 2 optional audits is the server audit specification. And you set this up also under the security area of SSMS, and you right click to create a new one. And again, naming the audit. So I tend to just name it server audit specification, or maybe server audit specification _ server name. Again, it's kind of up to you. Next, you have to choose the audit specification you just set up. You cannot create this without it. It will fail to create because that's where its data is going to write to. So you can't have a server specification, audit specification without that first setting up that where you're going to store it. Then we get into choosing our audit action types. There's a lot of choices, even more than what I listed here. So this here is just a blow up on the right. Here's just a blow up of this, this dialog box. I just wanted it to be more readable. There's just way, this is the 21, it's 21, it seems like a lot. The most useful 21 things I found. Sounds like some kind of article you would Google. Anyway, so there's way more than that even. Not a lot more maybe, but they're on the resources slide with a link to help explain each one more, and then you can see all the different ones you could choose from. Here I'm capturing perms and schema changes at the server level and in all the databases on the server. That's what these action types will do. If you just want to capture server changes with this audit, you'd remove all the ones starting with database and schema. And if you just wanted to capture changes to all the databases and then no server actions, you'd remove all the actions that don't start with database or schema. You don't have to fill out any of these other columns, the object columns, the principal name. They're not applicable to these action types. These action types happen above the object level at the server and database and schema levels. It is also disabled by default. Right click to enable it. Same thing applies. It doesn't collect any data if it's disabled. The second of 2 optional components is the database audit. These are in each database, and you have to go into the database security section and right click. In this case, I always name it or database audit specification _ database name. In this case, I have auditing, because it has to be unique across all the databases. So even if you set one up in auditing database, you couldn't name it database audit specification and then set one up in another, testing database, user database. You couldn't say database audit specification there as well. So that's why I always put an _ database name. Then of course you need that audit specification again, because that's where your data is going to live in that file. It'll error out, it won't let you create this database audit if you don't have that audit specification. Again, there's a lot of audit action types. And there's a link in the resources slide about all of these as well. This is going to capture perms and schema changes on this specific database. But don't use this if you're already getting database and schema changes at the server level, because that's just going to duplicate. You're just going to get two of everything then. I think where the database audit really shines is when you want to audit objects, because then you can audit things like insert, update, delete, select, execute on objects in the database, like tables, views, stored procedures. These action types do require you to fill in all the additional columns for the audit actions depending on the object class that you choose. Let's look at some examples. On that first line of the dialog box, the insert, I'm going to audit insert on an object. It's a table named testing with principal name public, which doesn't mean you're logging in as public. It just means get everyone who changes this to the table. So public just means everybody, anybody who inserts to testing table. I want to know about that. So for the object class, so you see I've selected all of these so you can see, and here's the drop down, how it looks. These are the three. I gave an example of each one. You do, for objects, have to select the schema, in this case DBO, the object name, the name of the table in this case, and then of course the principal name is public, that's everyone. For the object class schema, you don't have to put schema in here because it is a schema. So that is actually the object name in this case is DBO. And then in this case, I'm just getting if auditing user is changing, is deleting on this schema, not public. But if I did want to get everybody, I could do that. That's public. So I just chose to show you that you can do one user there. If you wanted to do multiple users, I think you have to add a separate line by line to do that. You may be able to do it differently in the script. Anyway, it is possible to do more than one user and not everybody at the same time. So then we have the database object class. And here I'm saying, I want to get anybody who updates the auditing database. You see, don't fill out the schema because it's not a schema. There's no schema. It's a database. So the database name goes in the object name column. There is one thing I want to say about auditing schemas and databases on the whole. If you do a whole schema or a whole database, those can get big fast. And it depends how busy your database or your schema is. Even updating in some schemas on our production servers, that can be big. That can be a lot. And that's just one of those things that, you know, your audit files will start rolling over a lot. You'll miss audit data. You'll have giant audit files. And so I just wanted to show you that these kinds of things are possible. I usually only do schema or database level, see everything that's happening in a schema or a database if I think, oh, this isn't being used. And I just want to double check. Oh, yep. Okay, I see it's not being used over time. And now I can get rid of it. But this is just to show you all the possibilities. Again, when you create the database audit, it's not enabled. You can right click it to enable it. It won't collect any data when it's disabled. If you try to add another database audit, for instance, we had that auditing table, auditing database that had an audit already. And if there's one already on it, it will say that it fails, that the audit specification already exists, which might be confusing. So meaning you can't add another database or server audit to it. It can only have one of each in audit specification. But that doesn't stop you from having multiple server and database audits, because you can have multiple audit specifications. This table outlines some examples of multiple audit specification handling different auditing. I've outlined a few scenarios here where you can have auditing a schema and perm changes at the server and DB level, and you have a specification and a server audit for that. Then you say, I want to audit everything SA does in a different audit specification with a server audit specification. Then you can also say, I want everyone changing a table. And then that has a different specification in a database audit. This is just to show you high level that this is possible. You can have more than 3 too, just depending on how you want to break it out. Just remembering to be careful that you don't want to have them overlap too much, because then you're collecting the same thing in multiple places. And each of these audit specifications can have one server audit and one database audit. It just happens that the examples that I came up with just have one or the other. This slide's just to show you how they relate to each other in the GUI. You have your audit specifications in the audit section, the server audit there as well. And then under each database, you have your database audit, just so you see them as separate objects, and then they're related through that audit specification. You can query the audit data in the GUI by right-clicking the audit specification and view the audit logs. A dialog box will pop up with 1,000 of the most recent events. Maybe there's nothing listed there because nothing auditable happened yet. Maybe you'll see tons because there's a bunch of stuff happening in the background that you didn't realize was happening. We'll go through how to filter soon, which allows you to filter the audit before it writes data out to the file. Then we have the columns available in the audit. They're what is available to you when you want to query the audit results or when you want to filter an audit. Different versions have different columns available. This table here just outlines the ones I find most useful. Like, it was really helpful in 2017 when we got the client IP added, made it a lot easier to figure out where stuff's coming from. 2019 was kind of nice with host name. Just something a little bit nicer. Application name, of course, that's nicer too. And somebody says, I don't know what I'm using that. Yeah, well, you're using it in this application. Oh, okay, yeah. So then they're a little bit more, okay, yeah, now I know what I'm doing. So there's a lot of columns, way more than this. These are just the ones I find most useful, and every version adds additional columns. At least it has over the years. I don't know about the next version. To filter, you can right-click in the GUI on the audit specification and choose properties, and it brings up the dialog box like when you set it up, and then you go to the filter page. You can also set this up when you create the audit. I just didn't want to add complexity at that point when we were showing that at the beginning. So you can do that all at once at the beginning. And here you can filter on any column that's available in the audit file. Like that slide I just showed you, those are the columns that you could filter on. This way you could filter things out like monitoring tools or service accounts. SQL Server has server name $sign accounts that do all kinds of stuff that you didn't realize until you start auditing. And they can really fill up your auditing files fast. And then it's hard to see the things you really want to see. So you just put the name of the column and then what you don't want it equal to or what you want it equal to. For example, if you just want to audit SA, you go put a filter on that here. This here is like a where clause in a SQL statement. So you can do anything you can do in a where clause in here, except you don't use the where keyword in that dialog box there. You can delete an audit in the GUI. It's kind of nice when you do it that way, because then you can check the box that says disable it first, because you have to disable it before you delete it. You can also do this with a script. Then there's a separate script to disable it, which I'm going to show on the next slide. If you delete the audit specification, the files remain on disk. That drove me crazy one time. All this old stuff in there. I deleted the audit and thought the files were gone too. No, they're still there on disk. I think it figures you might need them later. That makes sense to me, thinking about it now. But if you want them gone, you have to go manually delete them off of disk. You can stop the audit by right-clicking on it and choosing disable in the GUI. You can also do this with a script. There's a few examples here because the syntax is a little bit different for each of the audit types. Now, you won't be able to stop the audit if it's auditing actions. And that's another reason I keep mentioning don't audit too much, because you won't be able to easily query it because it's too much data, but you won't be able to stop it because it's too busy trying to audit. I actually have a horror story. I tried to stop an audit on a busy production server and I locked it up and it wouldn't stop. And then all of a sudden queries wouldn't complete. And then I couldn't get it into the server via SSMS. And I had to restart the service, and I caused a production outage. Thankfully, it was a very short outage and my boss was not upset with me. Technically, that shouldn't happen though. You should get a lock request timeout period exceeded error because your audit's saying, wait, I'm busy. I'm auditing this stuff over here, go away. I couldn't get it to crash in 2019. I tried. I had some really long running queries and tried to stop the audit. It always gave me this error message. Well, sometimes it actually stopped, even with a long running query, because it's catching the statement. And then when it starts, and then it's like, yeah, okay, that's still doing that, but I already caught that. So now I can stop. But if I had a lot of queries starting all the time, and if you had said, I'm going to audit all the selects happening, then it could be very hard to stop your audit. I was on 2014 SQL Server when my horror story happened. So it may have just been the nature of the version I was on or how busy the server was, and it was very busy. Mind you, it is not what I was doing when showing you here. I was not auditing just schema perms changes there. It was a bit more complicated setup. Working in a credit card processing company, people could decrypt credit cards through an application, and we had strict auditing requirements to capture that. Now those come through as a function with select statement, so it was a much heavier auditing setup too. So there's any number of factors. I still didn't expect it to freeze up the server though. Once an audit is created, you can modify it, but you can't modify it while it's enabled, so you have to stop it. And you can do that in the GUI or with the script. The only thing is you can't change the name of it. You have to delete it and recreate it to change that name. Quick SQL Server auditing via GUI summary. You need 2 things to make this work, or 3, depending on what you're trying to do. You got an audit specification that's required, and you need a server audit and or a database audit. Is a good stopping point for if anybody has any questions about this section.
I don't see that we have any, but I will tell you one of the things I struggle with when I use audit is the filter section that you were on, because that to me was so counterintuitive in figuring out what I could filter on and like how I was supposed to put that in there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any like tips for that.
I think what's helpful in understanding that is when we go through the scripts, when you start actually querying the audit file from scripts, it really helps solidify that knowledge, because then you can see how you create a filter in the script and you can see how you query it with a script, because then it becomes way more obvious what's available to you. I think in the GUI, it's very confusing because you can't really see the columns very well in the GUI, right. In that interface, it's just like, what? How can I filter? Yeah, I agree. It is pretty counterintuitive.
Right. So just a reminder, if you've got questions, throw them in the Q&A, just for folks who are listening, but otherwise you're good.
Okay, cool. We'll keep going. We'll start doing the script part now. Let's say you want to script out all the boring stuff, because you don't want to click, right click, click all these drop downs, because filling out those drop downs is a real pain. You're like, oops, I got that one twice. Oops, I missed one, because they're all so similarly named. You can right click the audit specification and script it out in SSMS. And then it's a lot easier to set up audits with this script, especially if you want to put it on multiple servers. Here is the script for the audit specification. It's really in alignment with what you set up in the dialog box. Nice thing about a script is you can also alter it at the end. So you have an alter statement to set it on. You don't have to worry about enabling it, because I forgot one time and I was thinking, why is this not auditing? Yes, it's disabled. I forgot to enable it. So you don't have to run that alter statement at the end of the create if you don't want to, if you want to have it in a disabled state to start, but it's nice to have it there so you don't forget to enable it. Creating a server audit specification via scripts, same options at the dialog box, just all scripted out. So it just makes it really easy to use the scripts, if you ask me, because then it's just so easy, all in alignment. You've got the name of the specification, you've got the association to your audit specification, right? Because you need that. This won't work without it. That's where it writes to. You got each of your actions listed as an add statement, comma separated. It makes it a lot easier for you to say, nope, don't really want to audit this thing. Or maybe you want to add something, and that's where the link for Microsoft comes in handy. You can go through that and say, okay, well, I'll plop another one here in here. And again, that link is that same link I mentioned is on the resource slide. This script setup will capture server level and database level perms and schema changes. Then you have your database audit, same idea here again with the database script really following the dialog box, naming your audit, associating it to the audit specification, putting your actions in here. This is going to get the schema and perms changes just for this one database. But remember, if you're already doing that at the server level, you don't want to duplicate that here. Then we have the auditing objects as a script. This shows you setting up a new server audit specification in case you already had another database audit on the auditing database. This is going to capture some things like inserts and selects and deletes that I don't really want to see in with my schema and perms changes. I don't want to centralize that stuff. I'm just going to keep that separate. That's my preference. You could also put this database audit specification, the auditing tables one, in your audit specification with the server one, as long as you didn't have another database audit already on your database. That's kind of up to you how you want to organize all your data. Remember the schema and database auditing, though, these updates and deletes on schemas and databases, those can get really big really fast. So they're just here as an example. Filtering with the script is very much like in the GUI dialog box. The big difference you'll note here is that you do need the where keyword in the GUI. You don't use the where keyword. That's pretty much the only gotcha with this. This is where you can exclude things or you can include things. You may say, I only want to see this database or this user, or I don't want to see the monitoring stuff. This is just really nice. The filtering just really so helpful because you wind up with a onslaught of information. Sys schema is really busy, or server name $, and monitoring accounts, all kinds of things can do all kinds of things in the background, and you're, whoa, what's all this data? It's just kind of crazy. Thankfully, querying the audit is pretty straightforward because I find using the GUI to look at audit data is less than optimal. I really have come to rely on these scripts. They're very easy to use and basically just calling a function to get the files from disk. One thing to note is the audit data is collected in UTC. If you're querying audit data, want to see the last hour, you may think, what is all this stuff coming through? Or why is nothing coming through? I went crazy one time. It's like, oh, wait, it's in UTC. And that's why there's the sysdate time offset in here to convert to local time zone. And these are the columns that are what's available in 2019. The version. So this will not necessarily work in 2017 or back, like host name, for instance, you'd have to take that out. These are not all the columns in the audit. They're a subset. They're what I find most useful. I also put the audit action in there as well to make sure I understand why something may have come through the action I didn't expect, like a select statement. Why am I getting the select statement? That's because there is a view server state. And it may just be associated with something else the user was doing. It's not something they specifically called, but something that the server does behind the scenes in addition to that. And this is where it helps you figure out how you can filter. So you could just say select star from the function get file name, and then you can see every column in there. And that's literally what you can filter on. Again, more disclaimer on auditing, just because I like to say over and over, I guess, that be careful how you audit, what you audit. You could overload or freeze up a production server. I didn't think it was possible to freeze it up, actually. That wasn't supposed to be the functionality, but it did happen to me. Worst case, it's going to be really, really hard for you to audit all your data. It's going to be trying to find a needle in a haystack. It'll be as if you didn't audit anything because it'll just be too much of it. So I just go with a less is more method of auditing. Just a quick script summary. You can do everything in the GUI and scripts. And it's easier to create on multiple servers with scripts, obviously. And I find it's easier to filter audit results with a query, or I just find it easier with the scripts. So I'm just going to take a quick break and see if anybody has any questions.
I don't think you've got any at this point. Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay, good. Everybody understands SQL Server auditing already. Yay.
I know it. I know it.
They're all geniuses. Okay, let's hop into a demo. All right. Okay, so I have my demo server here. So I'm going to start in the GUI. I'm just going to set up I'm going to set up an audit for you, like I showed you in the slides there. So we're just going to set up a specification. I got it on the first try. Every time I typed it before it was wrong. So then you pick a file. So I'm just going to do file. So I'm doing 1,000 milliseconds and get that a little bigger for you. 1,000 milliseconds delay, just default continues the default delay. I'm going to choose file in this case because it's just easier. Plus I'm on a Linux machine, so you can't even do Windows or security log, but you will have a Windows server most likely, so you can do that. And pick a folder, not the C drive, right? Preferably not. You know, if you're on a tester or something, I guess it's different. I still don't think you want to fill up the C drive, but then you set your max file size. So I just set for 50 megs. Again, you could reserve the disk space. I don't do that's only 2 gigs of data, so I'm worried that's probably going to be there for me. So I click OK. We see it's disabled. Right click to enable. Okay. Now that will have the file. Now the file will be on disk. It will be empty. Nothing will write to there because we don't actually have any audit specifications going there. So we have to create one, and then we have to associate to that audit specification. It's not going to work if you don't do that. Then we're just going to put an audit type in there, audit action. So we're just going to pick one. Just pick server. Hey, looks like a good one. Server object change group, just so we can see what happens. Okay, so we have it, it's disabled, right? We enable it. Now it'll actually collect things. So what I was going to do is just create some things so we can get a feel for, did this actually work? Okay, it created a testing database, right? Looks good. Now we will right click the audit specifications of view the logs. So this kind of takes a while to load too. That's another reason I don't like using as much. The query is very fast every time. So we wait a little bit. It will pull up this box. We're not going to see that create database because we don't have the right action to query it to actually capture that in the audit. And we do see this audit session change. This is one of these things it'll pick up because it only is picking up certain things with audit changes. It's not going to tell you any more details. Unfortunately, I picked around to try to find it. It won't tell you. It won't tell you, yeah, you enabled the server audit just now. It's only going to say audit session changed. That's kind of the nature of it. So let's just take a look here. We want to modify the audit. I don't want to right click and disable and all that other good stuff. So I'm just going to show you how you can alter it now. We're going to alter that server audit we just created. We're going to set it, we're going to disable it. So that's setting the state off. We're going to add the database change group now so that we can capture that creating of databases. Then we need to set it back on. So that's what we're doing here. Now I'm just going to drop and recreate it just so that we can see the create and we get that back in there. Now I'm going to switch over to the query because I don't like using that GUI. The GUI is nice for maybe a quick look-see or something, but I just don't find it that nice. Let me show you everything you could see in the file. There's a lot and my font is huge so that it's easier for you to read. We have the event time, which is very useful. Action ID I wind up using in the query. I'll show you in a second because that's a little less descriptive than I like. You get the succeeded, you get a lot of stuff that I don't use here, but you could use, there's just a lot of, there's a lot of stuff in here. I'm trying to scroll slowly so you could actually see some of it because I already know what's in here and you don't. Yet you're learning. So you have server instance, database name, schema name, object name, obviously not a schema here because these are above that level, the statement. There may be additional information, which I found is not very additional. It seems to be a whole lot of nothing. And even in the ones that have something, then you have a file name and some other stuff, lots of other stuff, more stuff. And client IP, like I said, very, very useful. Application name, Then you have these few here I thought are kind of cool. Response rows, affected rows. Those look cool. I haven't used them, but, and then finally in 2019, you have the host name way off to the side there. So that just gives you an idea. There's a lot of columns to work with. I don't use those all the time. This is the script from the slide that I use these. And I joined the audit actions table in because I want to actually see what the action is, not just some, I don't want to just see a code that says CR, which I know that means create, but I still don't want to just see that. I'd rather see an audit action because you're going to see some blank stuff sometimes where the statement's blank. Like I said, the audit session changed. You're still going to be in the dark exactly what changed, but it's still, at least you see, oh, okay, I see why it's blank. Now we see that I dropped the database. We see that I created it, right? Because we added that database change group. Let's go ahead and create a login. Let's, I just like to show you these things actually work. See, it did succeed, okay? But then we go back to the audit. We see, oh, we didn't capture that, but it worked. We know that it happened. That's because we don't have the server principal change group. So we're just going to alter that server thing. So then you can see when I change it in here, just quickly, you can see as I'm changing stuff, it's adding it over there. So we have the actions. Then I'm going to drop it and I'm going to add it again. Now you see, okay, yep, I dropped it. Now I created it. And then, like I said, I'm just getting some. You can see if it succeeded, the database name, the server name, some information about it, who did it, the file. So I usually put the file in there, but you know, the files go away. You might not be able to reference back, and the information about it. Then, well, we created that login, has no purpose in anything, but we want it to be a user in testing. And so we're going to go ahead, we're going to create that user. We're going to assign it some roles, and we're going to come back to our audit. Oh, no, it didn't audit that because it's not captured in those actions we added. We're going to have to add two things. Principal change group is to catch the user creation, and the role member change group is to catch the adding to data reader and things like that. And you see how these things can start adding up and why you have 21 of them. They're very compartmentalized. So you could do something very specific auditing wise, which is nice. But if you want to do all the perms and schema changes, you wind up having 21 actions. Well, it helps if I actually run the action because it won't audit things I don't do. So there we ran it, and then now we see it. Now we dropped that user, right? Because I want you to see the create user come in. I want you to see the alters come in. So those were being captured by these two changes we made to the audit. Now let's create a table in the testing database. Well, that's not going to be there because we don't have the schema object change group on our server audit. So we alter it. Then we go ahead, we drop the table and re-add it. There we go. Now you see the drop because I want you to see the create come through in the audit. So let's say that you want to grant a user perms to one table. Like you want them to rewrite to everything, but you only want alternates one table. Personally, I wouldn't do it this way. I would create a role for that and then put the user in it. But this is so you can see what this is in the auditing at least. So I'm going to grant alter to this user on this table. And then you're going to see those actions we put that doesn't cover it. That's not going to cover that action. So you need the schema object permission change group. I don't expect you to memorize all this. I just wanted you to see how it kind of builds together and into something like why do we need, oh, well, it helps if I run the action. I keep adding the auditing and then I don't add the action. There we go. So I just altered again, same statement, just so you can see, okay, now it comes through and it just keeps building on. A lot of these audit actions are kind of self-explanatory because you see it at the beginning, at the front, but it's just kind of nice because it just kind of helps solidify in your mind, like at this one down here that's blank, the statement. Now let's go ahead and insert into a table, into that testing table. We're not going to see that here because we're not auditing to that level. And in fact, you can't get that with a server audit. You're going to have to create a database audit. And what I usually do in these cases is I create a separate audit specification in a subfolder of the area I'm storing my auditing files, because I want this to be totally separate. I don't want to have to deal with getting mixed in the auditing report with schema perm changes. So I keep it separate. Mind you, you could put your database audit specification combined with your server audit. I just don't choose to do that. This is going to do this. The database audit will get that insert on the object by public. So that's anybody inserting to this table. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create this server audit. Okay, and then let me just refresh here. So you can see now we have a second server audit, an audit specification. And then now we created a database audit. So you're going to see that now down here in your database auditing area, testing tables. Now, if we insert again, well, we're not going to see it here because you have to add your subfolder, right? Because now I put it separate. I don't want it to go together. So you only see that insert and that the audit session changed because I enabled the database audit, right? So then they're just not together, but that's up to you if you want to store it all together and not have to deal with going different place, right? So then you'll notice here as we go over here, you know, different things succeeded. 0 will say it failed. So in case somebody didn't have perms or something, then you could see some people run stuff and you're like, what? They don't have perms to do that. Yeah, it didn't succeed. So then you can see we have your session server principal. And I wanted to show you that because I'm actually going to log in quickly, just so that you know that, yes, it does actually work, that when you say public, it's getting a bunch of other, these are just getting essay. It helps if I can type the right password. See, there's always going to be a typo. Woohoo, it worked. Okay, so now we're going to insert. So this is us inserting as testing now. And then we come back over to our audit. We see, okay, yep, another row for testing, the insert testing. And then we see, okay, now we see it's testing. It's a different user. Just wanted to show you to that really quick because that's what public means. Now I have this here to help show you how you would filter on something. Sometimes when I'm doing a demo of this, as I've tested it, it actually comes and it does things that just puts random stuff over here. You'll see session server principal name is like server name / server name $. That's what I've been talking about. Those things come through, or sys schema and all things like that. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen every time. It just happens sometimes. The server's doing things in the background, so we might not catch it. But this is how you would filter. So you'd have to set your audit specification off, add that filter, set it back on. And then if you come in and look here at now you had your filter, right? And so that shows you could add more here. You could just put an and then all of this stuff it puts in here with parentheses and, you know, square brackets and all this stuff. You don't have to worry about that. It's kind of formats itself. But that's the thing. And so that's when this is when you're in here, it really helps you go, oh, okay, ooh, I see now that something's coming through I don't like. And that's how you can really know how to filter better because you're seeing the results. So if you want to script everything out, you can just say, right click it, create it to a new query window. It'll just script everything out that you have in place. So you see all that. If you want to modify something, you're not sure how to script it out. This happens to me. Sometimes I say, I don't know, I really want 5. Mind you got to disable this first to modify it. But you're like, I really want it to be 5 files of 100, still a reasonable size. So then you take those changes, you know, you make those changes here, and then you just say script, and it brings you to this window, kind of just gives you this quick alter that you can run. So you don't have to know exactly how to write all these scripts either. If you don't know how to do it, you can just create something in the GUI and then right click. And then that's kind of how I started, honestly. I don't like right clicking a lot though, over time, so it gets boring. This is how you can disable the audits from script. So here I say if exists, and because I wanted to show you this quickly, there are system tables that store all the information about your audit specification, your server audit, your database audit. It stores all of that stuff in system tables. So here I'm saying if it exists in the system table, then alter it and turn it off, right? So all of these tables exist for you to query. You can see all the actions you're doing. I didn't have time to go through that in detail. There is an extra section on the slide deck, which goes over this in a bit more detail about how you can query it. But this is just going to disable the audit, all of them that I just set up. So they're all going to go and check, see if they exist, and then it's going to disable them if they do. So I'm just going to refresh quickly so you can see that these are all now disabled. And then again, same with the drop. We're checking to see if they exist, and then we're dropping them because now that they're all disabled, we can do that, can get them out of there. So refresh all of this just so you can see, yep, they're really gone. Or not, because I didn't hit the refresh, or because my script messed up because I named it something different probably. So testing tables, oops. But anyway, if you write the script right, then it will drop your audit. That's an important point. So, oh, maybe I didn't catch that one at the bottom there. Oh, my bad. Anyway, they're gone now, but you'll see that you can actually still query the file. See, all this still comes through because those files still living there. And this fabulously descriptive audit session changed is you dropping all those 4 audit sessions out, and then it doesn't, doesn't tell you anything more than that. So now we can set it all up via scripts. This is all just like as if I had scripted it out, except I added the schema name sys. So that's how you can add multiple to your filter. It's just like a where clause, exactly like a where clause. So this is going to create the server audit and set it on. So now we're going to have that server audit back again. That's audit specification, excuse me. I thought this saying specification over and over is a lot. So then we have the server audit. And I usually set this up to get all the server and database and perms and schema changes. So those are all these actions that I had shown on the slide as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just set this up. So much easier than trying to do all that. How long would that take me to set up in front of you, and how boring would that be for both of us? Then there's the database audit. If you aren't already doing that, because we just set up the server audit right here. It's doing all this stuff already. That's why it's commented out. It's just here in case you're not doing it at the server level. Now you can do it at the database level. And then here's what I need if I want to audit some other, like a table insert. That's that audit specification and the insert of the table. So that's now set back up. We can just see it all in here, and it's going to do what we already tested. Then just so you know, I'm not messing with your mind, setting things up that don't work. Now we show, okay, it created that. It does catch some of these creates of specifications if something's already in place to catch an audit. These usually audit session changed means something changed, but I couldn't catch it because I didn't actually have an audit there to catch it. But you see all the old stuff is still here. This is all the old stuff. This is from the new audit, just because it's querying all the files with that star on disk. So that is the demo. I can stop for a second, see if anybody has any questions before I start going to the centralized auditing part.
There aren't any so far. I think everybody's just kind of following along.
Everybody's just so amazed. They're just dumbfounded by how exciting auditing is now. Everybody thought auditing, now yay, auditing. So
it's a lot.
Oh, it's so much information. I say it's easy, and then I explain it, and I think, look,
I know.
It was not easy to figure it all out. Let's say you have a lot of servers you want to audit. And generally speaking, most people probably have more than one production server. I found the easiest way to handle querying and reporting on audit data is to have the audit data centralized. It just makes it way easier to generate a report of what happened in the last day or the last week of auditing data. You start with 2 things on your audited server. Each audited server has a link server, linking it back to the central server, and it has an agent job that utilizes the link server to send it to the central server. I schedule my agent jobs to run every hour, but it's kind of up to you how often you need to send it based on how fast your audit files roll over. If you need more information on link servers or SQL agent, there are a couple links on the resources slide. I generally just centralize perms and schema changes because those are the things that need to be reported on with the auditors. If I'm auditing table level inserts or something like that, then I don't centralize that. Like I showed you how to keep it in a separate file in a separate folder with the files of the audit files themselves with the audit specification. Once your audited servers have sent it to the central server, you can have a job on the central server that sends a report with HTML formatted email or send it to a ticketing system. I send a daily email with HTML format. Then I can see any changes over the last day to catch red flags sooner than later. You can also have a job that sends an HTML file to the ticketing system once a week. We do that because the auditors require that. I also have a cleanup job so that the auditing table doesn't get too big. I keep 30 days, but it's kind of up to you how much history you need. It can get really big really fast if there's a lot of changes going on, so I just don't want that kind of piling up. You also need database mail configured on the server so your SQL agent can send emails, and there's also more info about that on the resources slide. Here's a sample report. This is a cross section and gives you an idea of how it could look. You have the event time, and I send a partial statement in the email. Full statements are still in the database, but you can always go there and look. Sometimes the statements get long depending on what you run, and it can kind of blow out the report. So I just do that partial statement. Then you have the server name, where it happened, and the database name. If it's for an object inside the database, then you'll have a schema. You get the username of who changed it, and then whether it's successful or not. I recently added the successful column because we were seeing people running scripts. We thought, ooh, that can't be something they have perms to do. And it turns out the audit will show you that did not succeed. And this app user here, as an example, doesn't have perms to truncate a table. Well, theoretically, it could have failed for a different reason, but it failed. And it shows a 0 then for that failure. Quickly review this. The centralized audit database just makes it easier to query and report on stuff. You just have an audited server send the data over there, and your central server can send daily or weekly. It just depends on your needs. And then just a quick break for questions if there are any.
You're good.
Okay, good. And it allows me to take a drink of water too.
Yeah, you take a drink of water anytime you need.
Yeah, well, it's easier when there's a question period. It's like, ooh,
that's true.
time.
That's true. But we all understand.
So now we have high-level cloud options compared to SQL Server auditing. Cloud VMs. If you set up a VM in the cloud, you get exactly the same ability because you have SQL Server running on a Windows server. Some of these others are quite similar and others are pretty different. You have Azure SQL Managed Instance and Amazon Web Services RDS. They both have SQL Server audit functionality. You can set it up the same, GUI scripts, however you like, except you can't save it on a local disk because there's no Windows server for you to access underneath. You have to use a cloud storage and then query it from that storage. As for Google Cloud, I haven't personally used it, but it looks like you have some cloud audit logs that may be able to capture what you're doing with SQL Server auditing. And it's all stored in their portal. Azure SQL does not have SQL Server auditing, but it does have server and database audits via the portal. Because I know a lot of people may be moving to Azure SQL from SQL Server. Let's just take a closer look at how that works. The auditing is built in the portal, and you can enable it for free or a cost depending on the storage location. Well, technically the type of storage you choose, because it is a local storage location in Azure. The free log analytics storage stores up to 500 megabytes a day, and you can keep up to 7 days of history. And the server audit applies to all databases. There is no option to say, don't do database auditing at the server level. That doesn't exist here. And don't audit at the database level if you already have auditing at the server level, obviously, because you're gonna duplicate everything. And there's no filtering on these audits. So you just get everything audited. It is available in all the pricing tiers though. And here's a high level of turning it on at the server level. You literally click on and then choose your storage location. Like I said, I use log analytics to take advantage of some free storage. Mind you, you might run out of space because 500 megabytes in a day isn't a lot. And since you can't filter, you're going to have a lot more than that. On a production server, I turned it on one time, ran out of space before that 500 megs, but at least you can test it for free. And then something that was confusing to me at first is you enable at the server level, but you have to view it at the database level. There's no way to view at the server level. So to view the audit logs, you go into each database and you choose auditing and you click on view audit logs. Then you click on log analytics, and then you come to these logs with this query, and I'm not sure what language, and then you can filter here. So you're getting everything in here, but then you can use this query to filter down a bit. And I created a table just so you can see, yes, that was me. I created that table, testing. I love testing, I guess. I love that word. And so I put that table in there, create table for you. So, it picks that up. And so again, you turn on the server level and then you can do it at the database. You see it, all the data at the database level. Thing is if you don't want to audit all the databases that are on that instance of Azure SQL, then you could turn on the database level, but you don't want to do that if you have it to server, because then it duplicates everything. So just a quick summary. Each cloud provider has their own options, right? They may be very similar or very different. That's the upshot. I don't know if anybody has any questions about that.
I haven't seen any come through related to
Okay.
that last topic here that you've covered.
Okay, cool.
Cloud.
So just a quick overview of SQL Server audit, right? You can have that one audit specification. It's required. You got to have it. You can have a server database audit specification, one each in that audit specification. Of course, you can have multiple audit specifications and they can each have a server and database audit. You can set these all up via the GUI or in a script, and you can query them both that way. Remember, again, another red bold disclaimer: don't audit so much that you can't stop it or query it, just because of my horror story. So this is the lovely resources slide I keep mentioning. So there's your links, and then thank you for attending. And I just want to say thank you to New Stars of Data for giving me this opportunity. And thank you so much to Leslie Andrews, my lovely speaking mentor. So much help she gave me. It was wonderful. And then I have my extra slides. These are the slides I couldn't cover. Just really quickly, they cover things like monitoring changes to SQL agent jobs or SSIS. Some people may have SSIS. Or auditing a whole server, excuse me, don't audit the whole server, like I'm just going to say that. Auditing a user, one user, and some of the actions that involves. And then those sys tables, there's some more information on that too. So that's all back there is a 5 slides or something for you.
Yeah!